the world, like what plants need to grow or how to blow bigger bubbles, there's a way to find an answer to these questions and questions like them that's used by scientists. It's called the scientific method. And if you use it, you can be a scientist too. So the scientific method is a way to ask and answer scientific questions by making observations and doing experiments. There are 6 simple steps to follow. First, ask a question or identify the problem you would like to solve. What would happen if I mixed the white powder with the blue liquid and the orange liquid? Second, you're going to make observations and do research about your topic. What happens when we mix liquids and solids or powders? Observation means to study carefully. So, I'm looking at this blue liquid here. It's got bubbles on top. The orange liquid doesn't have bubbles. I'm not really smelling too much of an aroma. I wonder what would happen. So I've got a bubbly liquid here and a orange liquid there, and I know that if I mix white with any other color, it kind of makes like a creamy color. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to use what I've observed and what I know and what I've researched, and I'm going to form a hypothesis. A hypothesis is an educated guess about how something works. In order to be useful, a hypothesis needs to be testable. This means that you can actually test it and see whether it's true or not. So my hypothesis is going to be, when I mix the white powder with the orange liquid, it's going to make a creamy orange colored liquid, a little bit thicker. And when I mix the white powder with the blue bubbly liquid, it's going to create more bubbles, but it's also going to be a bit thicker and runnier. When I mix the powder with the blue bubbly liquid, I feel like it is gonna maybe create some more bubbles, and it's also gonna be a little bit thicker and maybe like a creamy blue color instead of just the translucent blue that it is now. After creating my hypothesis, I'm going to move on to step 4 of the scientific method. That is to design an experiment and test the hypothesis. So, when you design your experiment, you must be sure to only test one thing at once. You can do this by making sure to only change one thing or variable in each experiment. Everything else must remain the same. So, I'm going to put blue liquid and orange liquid into the test tubes. And then I'm going to mix a little bit of the powder into each of the test tubes. The only thing that I am changing is the liquid that the powder is being mixed into. So remember, you only want to change one variable. All right, guys, to save us some time, I've already put the white powder into the test tube. So now I'm just going to add a little bit of blue liquid to one of the test tubes and a little bit of orange liquid to the other. So I've added the blue to the white. We're going to mix it around. Now let's add a little bit of orange to the white. We don't want to mix our chemicals, so we're going to keep our blue dropper there. Now we've got our orange liquid. Add a little orange liquid to the white. Whoa! So there was obviously some sort of reaction there. Let's try that again. All right, so I see bubbles. That tells me that gas has been released. Definitely think there's a chemical reaction occurring here. Interesting. So I'm still hearing some fizzing going on in here in this test tube. And this test tube didn't really seem to do very much. There are a few more bubbles there. Interesting. So now that we've completed our experiment, we're going to analyze our data. And to do this, we're going to look at the results of the experiment and try to put together what it all means. Lastly, using our data and observations from the experiment, we're going to draw a conclusion. Your conclusion should either agree or disagree with the hypothesis. If your conclusion disagrees, it doesn't mean that it was a bad experiment. You'll just use the information that you formed from this experiment to guide your next experiment. So my hypothesis was that when I mixed the white powder with the orange and the blue liquid, that it was just going to create a cloudy mixture that was less transparent, and maybe more bubbles would form with this one. I was actually opposite, because what happened is when I mixed the orange liquid with this white powder, it actually created a chemical reaction which released lots of bubbles and lots of gases. So with this information, I could probably form a new hypothesis, so a little bit more scientific, and I could create a new experiment to test it. If my conclusion had supported my hypothesis, maybe I thought this was baby powder instead of baking soda, then I could create a new question I'd like to test. Like, what would happen if I mixed baby powder with these two substances instead of baking soda or baking powder? Some people get confused between baking powder and baking soda. They have very different chemical reactions. So then you can begin the scientific process all over again.